it's Lisa. I have a photo today that I want to scrap, and the inspiration for how I'm going to do the page is actually coming from some product. I bought this in my last two-piece order. The flare that I really wanted got sold out at the last minute, and so I put this in my cart and immediately thought, after I sent the order off, like, oh, I shouldn't have bought that. That's not my style. It's neutrals, it's vintage, it's not really me. But I decided to challenge myself and make a neutrals page, because I'm normally a color person. So I wanted to do a page with just neutrals on it. And my first inclination was to do a picture of my mom, because she wears a lot of neutrals and looks fabulous in them. But I decided, I went through my pictures, and I had this picture of my husband and his sister, and yes, she has on a blue shirt, but they're standing on a very neutral background, and I thought that it would work really well with the neutrals, so we're going to give it a try. Anyway, I've gone, one of the other reasons I wanted to do this, besides this product, is I keep drawers of when I break down my collections of all my extra papers, and once upon a time, my neutrals drawer was pretty skinny, didn't have a lot of stuff in it, and not only did I add from breaking down the collections, but I bought a lot of just individual pieces of neutral paper thinking I would use them. Well, I haven't used them, and they've kind of collected, so that would be a good time to weed through some of that product and put it to good use. So I went through all of the 12 by 12 full-size pieces that I had left, and I found these three that I wanted to consider. I really love this one from Simple Stories. I've had it a while, and I keep saving it for something special, and this photograph is certainly special, so that's a consideration there. I don't get a lot of pictures of my sister-in-law, so that's a possibility. This gold paper, I'm not really that thrilled with. I don't think that one's going to work out. This is very, very neutral from crepe paper, and that's a possibility too. I like this one, but my concern with this one is when I pulled several other small pieces that I would use for layers out, most of them ended up also being dark prints, and I think they're going to get lost on this background. If I start off with this as a background, I think it's going to be harder for me to do layering and to work the other things in. These are a lighter color, but they're not going to end up laying right on this background. They're going to be on other papers. So I'm kind of putting this aside for just something really simple here. So I'm thinking of doing this one, and I've got several other papers here to do for some layering, and then of course my vintage flare. I got some ideas to use some twine along with the flare. I have a couple of different possibilities with that. For the title, my husband just calls his sister Sis, and so I thought I would use some large chipboard. Now the green ones, they're not going to be green when I get done with them. So that's the products that I have so far, and I think I'll get started pulling together some of the layers for this page. So in figuring out the layers, I'm trying to decide which one I want my photo to lay on, whether a lighter color or a darker color. I just play with each of the different ones. I really like this lighter gold that's just a shade darker than the background of the photo. Just playing with the order, and this print down here, I really like this print. I want to use a band of it going across, so I just need to get the right size in place. And then over in the up right corner, I'm going to use some ledger paper for journaling. I've got my little embellishments there, but it's bothering me because to me the page is very blah and it needs some help. And what I decided it needed was something on the background besides just that beige tone-on-tone paper. So I've got some different masks that I'm going to apply. I've got a really small one here that I thought would look good, but it looks like the photos will cover just about all of it up. And the medium size one pretty much the same. So I'm gone to the largest one, and when I lay the photos on that, I was really surprised at how much of it shows, and rather than doing the mask in two places, just doing it in one place on the background. So I've got two distress inks, old paper and vintage photo, and I'm going to start with the lighter one, old paper, because I can always go darker. I considered misting it, but this paper's really soft kind of texture, and I just don't know what the mist would do to it. So putting a little washi tape to hold this down, and then I'm going to go over it with the old paper ink, just with a sponge. That way I have real control over where my color goes and how much color, I love mist, but there's, it's just different looks, and as I say, I don't think this paper would respond well to the mist. It might, but I only have one sheet of it, so I got to do what I think is the safest. All right, I went over this with old paper, and I decided to add just a little bit of the vintage photo, and I checked that out, and I like the look of it. I'm going to show you a close-up of the whole thing here in a few minutes. I just put it in a few spots, old paper over the whole thing, and vintage photo in just a few spots, and it gave it a really wonderful effect. As I say, I'll show you the entire background in just a moment. I couldn't hardly remember how my layers went. I almost had to rerun the video to look at that, but I've got an arrangement here that I like. Except the area behind the photos there, I think that it needs something. So I put some distress ink around the edge of the gold. And I'm going to need, I believe, to do some stamping behind the photos. I end up doing it on the darkest paper. Here's the close-up. So you can see that that mask just really made a completely different background paper. All right, this darkest paper ends up being the one that's going to go behind the photo. And I'm going to stamp it and emboss it in white, which I'm a little concerned is going to be too white, but we're going to give it a try. Just doing some flourishes on each side since it kind of hangs out from the photo on both sides. I had to use a brush to get some of the extra embossing powder off. So now I'm wishing I'd put it just a little bit over to the side there, the stamped image, but it's not bad in placement. My issue though is it's white embossing powder. I don't know of an ivory embossing powder. I've never stumbled across one. I'm going to make a concerted effort to find one. If anybody knows, please let me know, because a lot of times I'd like to have something in off-white rather than white, and I tried going over it in ink and all that did was ink the background. So I kind of had to give up on that. And what I'm doing now is taking the tops off of these letters. And you have to do this carefully, but they'll usually pop off fairly easily. And now I'm down to raw chipboard on all three of the letters, and I'm going over them with some distress paint. This is the vintage photo paint. Now the distress paints I think look a little different than the distress inks. This is a little bit orangier to me than what it comes out when you use it as ink. That's just my impression of it. And in my case it wasn't quite the right color. So it was a good base. And I'm going to go over the top of it with some paint. This color is called Espresso. It's just a craft paint. And I'm just dry brushing it on so I don't get too much because I don't want the letters too dark. And I'm kind of taking them over to the side there to check them with the layout. And they seem to be working out pretty good. And I'm going to add some stamping to the top of them. For now, I'm just going to put them aside, and I've got some other stamping that I want to do. I have some vellum that I'm going to use for the pocket. This is an ivory colored vellum. I buy it at Hobby Lobby, their Paper Studio brand, and I'm stamping it with a background stamp from Basic Gray and Hero Arts in that old paper color. And it was very subtle, but it does give you a design when you do that light color on vellum. And I'm stamping a couple of images from Stamping Up, just again in the neutral colors, one in Vintage Photo, and I added some of the walnut stain, the darker color. Probably should have done the butterfly in the dark and the leaf in the lighter one, but still, it looks good. Okay, and I'm going to use that same background because it was so subtle, I think I can get by with using it again. I'm using the walnut stain for it and then just applying the letters over the top of it, and I'll press down with the paper to get them stamped good. And those I was really pleased with. It added a lot more dimension to the letters. They look good with the paper. I think they need one more touch, and that's to go over the edges with a little bit of walnut stain ink just to finish them off. Alright, getting things put together here. I'm not quite glued anything down yet, or glued everything down yet, because I thought that it needed a little trim, just a little bit more texture. This one trim I loved, but I only had a small amount of it. So I just went through all my neutral trims. I like this one a lot, going across there. I have some browns, but the problem with the browns is they're just a little bit too dark. This lacy one I really liked, but if I put it on even underneath the layers, it's kind of taking away from the lettering. and from the accents there to the photo. So I went with a neutral. I had just enough trim left to go across there and slightly onto the pocket. I'm going to stitch the pocket down so that we can have the journaling card go down in it. Right, and I've got my stitching done and my letters on, and we'll see some close-ups of this at the end. The last thing to do are these vintage flare that I got from Prima. And the way I'm going to accent them is I'm taking some twine and I put down one of those pop-up glue dots, the real thick ones, and I'm just pressing the twine into it, just making little circles like a little flower. I'm pressing it down in there. Now I'm kind of running out of the gooey part of this. I'm going to have to add some hot glue over the top, but it'll give me a real rustic looking flower. And I'm sorry my head's in the way, but I'm using the hot glue gun to kind of press the last of that twine in, and I actually managed to do this without burning my fingers. I was real proud of myself. All right, peel that off the wax paper, and I have an accent that I can glue on to the page. Okay, I have my completed page, and I'm pretty happy with it. This is not my normal style, but I think it came out fairly nice. Using the mask on the back really helped that background. Got some layers, a little bit of embossing, and some trim here with some stitching around the pocket and around this area, and then I used some of just my plain old ordinary twine that I get from the jewelry department at Hobby Lobby to accent these vintage buttons, flares from Prima. And so I have a little pocket here. My husband can do some journaling about his sister, which I'd like for him to do in his handwriting. And then I have a little embellishment up here at the top. I chose the frog because my sister-in-law always has some kind of pet. I don't think she's ever had a pet frog, but I've got one with a kitten and one with a frog on it. Those were the two animals in the group, and I thought those suited her, and I liked the whimsy of this as well for my husband. So anyway, that's my page. Thanks for watching and going on a little journey with me doing a few different things than what I normally do.